Hello everyone, thanks for joining for lesson 2 of Koine Greek. Just a quick couple of points of order. First and foremost, thank you for coming on. Second, we're going to try to follow the same format week after week. And this weekly format that we are going to try to follow is going to be, first, we will do a quick review of the previous week. And then after we do a quick review of the information that we covered, we'll do a brief review of the exercises that are in place for that particular week, whatever the lesson is, just to ensure that you understand that you've got a grasp of what was going on. And then from there, we'll move to the topic or the lecture material that's new for the week. We'll cover any terms, paradigms, which you'll understand that a little bit more today, as well as some examples of what we're doing. We'll cover new vocabulary for the week after that. And then we will demonstrate one of the exercises for the new material. Then when we come on the following week, we'll review the material, the exercises, the new topic, vocabulary, and so forth. Okay, so as we come into week 2, what we'll do first is do a quick review of week 1, where we covered your alphabet. I will put the alphabet on the screen for you so you can follow along. And as I give you each letter, I will also give you the sound or typical pronunciation sound that it's going to make. And then we will look at the exercise that was included with week 1 of the reading of John 1, 1 through 5. So your alphabet, as you see here, is alpha, A as in father, beta, B as in boy or Bible, gamma, G as in gone or get or go, delta, D as in dog, epsilon, it's a short E, as in met, zeta would be Z as in days, eta would be a long A sound or a long E as in obey. Theta, TH sound, a th as in thing or that. Iota would be I or I as in intrigue. It can be short or long. So intrigue is a good example of how it can be both within the same word. Kappa, K as in kitchen. Lambda, L as in law. Mu, be a M as in mother, an M sound. Nu, an N sound, N as in new. Xi, it'd be an X sound as in axiom. Omicron would be the short O sound as in not. Pi would be the P or P sound as in peach. Rho would be the R sound as in rod or road. Sigma, and remember the short or the regular form and the ending form. So you've got two different versions of sigma. The one that looks more like our modern S would be the end of a word only. Makes an S sound as in study. Tau would be T or as a T sound as in talk. Upsilon is going to be like a German U with the umlaut over top of it. So it's going to be like almost like the double OO in boot. Phi would be a PH sound as in phone or an F sound. Chi would be a CH like a loch. It's going to be a guttural sound like you'd get the CH at the end of Loch Ness. Psi would be a PS like in lips. The end of that would be psalm. And the final letter is omega, is your long O as in tone. Also, don't forget you have what is called diphthongs, which is going to be two vowels placed back to back. And they will give you a little bit different pronunciation, a little bit different sound. So you would have your alpha, iota, that would be pronounced like our AI in aisle. You would have your epsilon iota, which would be pronounced like the long A or the eta, such as in fate. You would have the omicron iota, which would be pronounced much like our OI, which would be in oil. The alpha upsilon, which would be like the OW in cow, the epsilon upsilon, which would be like our EU in feud, the omicron upsilon, which would be like the two O's in food or boot. So it would be much like the upsilon. And then you would also have the upsilon iota, which would be like the UEE sound that we have in Queen. So those are your main points from lesson 1. That's your vocabulary. Again, quick review of vocabulary: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, and omega. That is your alphabet, your Greek alphabet. So once you know those and you know the pronunciations, even if you don't know a lot else, you'll at least be able to look at the form of the Greek word and you will be able to at least pronounce it with some level of knowledge. The exercise for last week was a reading of John 1 through 5, just to become accustomed to the pronunciation of the Greek words. I'm going to put that up on the screen for you here, and you can read along as I go through it. It would read, En arche ein ho logos, kai ho logos, ein pros ton theon, kai theos on hein logos. Hutas ein in arche pros ton theon, panta de altu egeneto, kai kodes altu egeneto ude hin. Ho gegenomen in alto zoe ein, kai he zoe ein tophos ton anthropon, kai tophos in te scotia phine, kai he scotia altu u katalabin. So there's your reading, your alphabet, and your points from lesson 1. Now, if you have purchased the Machen Greek New Testament or New Testament Greek for Beginners, you will notice that lesson 2 in there is for accents. Now, when I took Greek at a graduate level, I took it from Dr. French Arrington, and he gave us a pretty lengthy lecture on why accents are not important to learn, particularly in modern day and working in the New Testament Greek. There are very, very few words where accent is going to make a difference. Matter of fact, there's probably just 2 or 3 words in the entirety of the New Testament to where the accent would really matter. So we can learn those forms as we go without doing the unnecessary work of learning all the rules on which accent goes where, because there's 3 different accents that can go in 3 different locations depending upon forms and other things. So we are going to generally skip accents except for maybe 2 or 3 words to where it matters. And the reason we're doing that is the way I was taught, and it has served me exceptionally well, coming to the point to where I understand the Greek language, or at least understand it enough to work in. So what we're going to do, we're going to go directly to lesson 3. And what I want to do here for you is, first, before we cover vocabulary, if you've purchased a book, you will notice that your vocabulary typically will come at the beginning of the chapter. But I want to cover some of the terms and what we're going to be looking at before we actually look at vocabulary. That way, some of the things is going to make a little bit more sense to you as we do it. So today we're going to cover the present active indicative verb form. And what I mean by verb form, in English, we are not a very inflective language. In other words, we have a different word for everything. In the Greek language, you can take a verb and you can take the stem of the verb, and I will show you the stem during this lesson, and you can form somewhere in the neighborhood of 160 to 170 different forms of that one stem to cover the range of ways that a verb might be used. You have your tense, which is it's the property of a verb that indicates aspect or a way of viewing action. And in the indicative mood, it's the time of action. So in Greek, tense primarily is going to reflect a perspective on the action that the speaker or writer wishes to convey. In Greek, there are three tense systems that we will use. We'll use the progressive, which denotes a continuing action or a customary or a repeated action. We're also going to have the perfect tense, which denotes a state of affairs that is a completed action. And then we're also going to have the aorist, which doesn't reflect any particular view of action. But what you'll also see is that is typically going to be something from the past. In the indicative mood, but not in the other moods, tense is going to refer to the time of action as well as the aspect. And so therefore the indicative mood is going to have two subtenses in the progressive system. We're going to have the present and the imperfect. And the two subtenses in the perfect system will be the perfect and the pluperfect. And then there's also a future tense, which is mostly in the indicative mood. It's a lot more complex than what you find in English. In English, we typically just have a simple present, simple past, and simple future. Either it has happened, it is happening, or it will happen. But things are a little more complex in the Greek. You also have a voice in Greek. So present is the tense. That's what we're going to work on today. Active is the voice, and the characteristic of the verb that indicates whether the subject is doing the action or being acted upon is the voice. So an active voice means that the subject is doing the action. Passive would indicate that they are being acted upon. But in Greek, they also have another voice, and that is called the middle voice. And it is an action that is somehow brought about by both parties, both the subject and the one acting upon the subject. So again, there we get a little more complicated. And then we also have mood. So present is the tense, active is the voice, indicative would be your mood. And that's the characteristic of a verb that indicates relation of the verb to reality. So in other words, the indicative mood indicates that it is reality or it is a certainty. We have the subjunctive mood that we will look at due time, and it indicates a probability or potentiality. And then we have an imperative mood, which is a commanded action. And then on very rare occasions, there is an opative mood that expresses an improbability or a wish. And then sometimes we'll also have participles and infinitives that will be regarded as moods as well. So when you start doing all of that math, you actually come out with over 1,000 different forms. But the reality is we're going to be able to narrow things down to where you can really do about 160 to 170 forms with various verbs to indicate ways of saying things. So there's a lot of depth we're going to cover over the next 25 to 30 weeks. And it does take some work on your part to be able to grab a hold of what is being done. The first few weeks are going to be rather slow. It's going to be probably a bit frustrating for you because it is a very new way of understanding things. One word can almost be a complete sentence, and in some cases can be a complete sentence, as you'll see with the verbs and the endings, to indicate 6 different groups of people and what they are doing. And that would be the present active indicative. It is going to be translated as, for an example, one of our vocabulary for the week is grapho. That would be a gamma, rho, alpha, your phi, omega. I write. So that can be translated as either I write or I am writing. For now, we will simply look at it as I write. But you could see where that could be a complete sentence. If we look at it in a progressive or as an ongoing action, I am writing is a complete sentence. So grapho, one simple word gives you a complete sentence in the Greek. But now in the Greek, each word, and we're going to see this today, you're not going to have I write, and then a separate word for you write, and then another for he or she or it writes, or we write, or you as in plural write, or even they write, a third person plural. We are simply going to change the endings on the word. So I will, at various points, put graphics up. Some of this is just going to be lecture, but you can follow along in the text, or you can print out the handout that I have uploaded here as well that will give you the paradigm and the information. So when you look at a word in a Greek lexicon, what you're going to find is a lexical form that will be the present active indicative first person singular. That is always going to be the entry in, we call it a lexicon, what you would typically know as a dictionary. So the form used as a dictionary entry in the Greek is always going to be the present active indicative first person singular. That is important because that is going to be what you look up when, for example, you might see something that instead of the gamma, rho, alpha, phi, omega, you see a gamma, rho, alpha, phi, epsilon, iota, sigma, graphes. Graphes would be the second person singular present active indicative of grapho. I write. So we change that ending from I, or from omega, which means I write. You drop that off, and then you replace it with the epsilon, iota, sigma, and you have you write, or you are writing. So the stem is going to be that present active indicative, first person singular, minus the final letter, which is omega. It's always omega in the present active indicative, first person singular of a verb. It is omega. So you drop that omega off and you have your stem, which in the case of grapho would be your gamma, rho, alpha, phi. That's going to be your stem. And then you plug in whichever ending that you need to indicate what it is that you're trying to say. If you're trying to say I write, then the omega goes on the end. If you're going to do a second person singular, it would be epsilon, iota, sigma, which would be you write. If you're trying to say that someone else writes, you and a person are having a conversation about a third person, that would be he, she, or it writes, which would be an epsilon iota ending. If you and another person are talking, so you're going to do a first person plural, you're going to plug in that particular ending, which would be your omicron, mu, epsilon, nu. Omen, we write. So graphomen, we write. To do a second person plural, in English, we really don't have a differentiation between first and second person you. You can simply say you and refer to a single person or to a group of people. But in Greek, it is two different forms. So for a plural second person, in the Greek, you would plug in an epsilon, tau, epsilon, so it would be grapheta. And if you want to speak in the third person plural, as in they, that group of people, while you're speaking with someone else, it would be an omicron, upsilon, sigma, iota. So it would be graphusi. They write, or they are writing. So there are distinctions between first, second, and third person, and then there are distinctions between singular and plural. So with the present active indicative for the verb, that stem is going to remain constant throughout, and it's going to remain constant throughout all of our lessons and all of our verb forms. That stem is going to remain the same. We'll see different ways and different forms, different endings, but that stem of the word that stays constant is always going to remain the same. So anytime you see that gamma, rho, alpha, phi, you're going to know that it has something to do with right. And you just have to determine whether it's I write, grapho, whether it's you singular write, which is graphes, whether it is he, she, or it writes, which is graphe, whether we write, graphomen, whether you group, you plural is writing, it would be graphete, or whether they are writing, which would be graphosi. Now, one of the things that's going to help you with your memorization of this, and it really simply is a memorization, is to parse the verbs. Anytime you find a verb, and for some time, what you'll want to do is every time you encounter that verb, you will want to parse it at the very least mentally, if not actually written out on the exercises. And to parse a verb is to identify a particular verb according to its form. And all verbs in this chapter would be parsed as present, active, indicative. But to be fully parsed, they must also be identified by person and number along with their lexical form. If you remember, the lexical form, I told you, is always the present, active, indicative, first person singular form of a verb. So thus, one of our vocabulary words for this week would be to teach is didaskete. And to be parsed fully, and that would be you teach. So to parse that fully, you would parse it this way: the present, active, indicative, second person plural of didasko. Present, active, indicative, which is your voice, tense, mood. But along with that, you also must put your person and number. So didaskete, you, plural, teach. You would parse as present, active, indicative, second person plural of didasko. Didasko is the first person of the present, active, indicative. And you need to make a practice of doing that until recognition of a particular form is automatic. So here is your vocabulary for the week. Your vocabulary this week, and I'm going to put the group on the screen here for you to be able to see. So blepo, I see. Gnosko, I know. Grapho, I write. Didasko, I teach. Echo, I have. Lambano, I take, or I receive. Lego, I say. And luo, I loose or I destroy. Now for lambano and luo, context will typically tell you which way to translate it. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, you can translate it either way. Also, as a point of remembrance, if you will look at echo, and I'm going to put a larger form on the screen here for you, you will see that smooth breathing mark along with an accent over the epsilon at the beginning of echo. By smooth breathing mark, I mean that it is open to the front of the word and closed to the back. If you remember last week, I told you that you will have a breathing mark over any beginning vowel and also over a row at the beginning of a word. The breathing mark, if it's as this is on echo, it is a smooth breathing mark and needs no attention to pronunciation. However, if it's closed to the front of the word or reversed and it's open to the back of the word and it's a rough breathing mark, then you would pronounce an H, a H sound at the beginning. So echo would thus become heko. And you'll see some words like that. Helios, the word for sun, begins with an epsilon, but it has a rough breathing mark, so that H sound goes up at the beginning. So that is a good word for you to remember here, the echo. Echo, no rough breathing. It is a smooth breathing mark, and it simply means I have. So now your exercises for this week, and again, this is a form that you can download. I would encourage you to actually do this in writing as well as parse each one of the words as you go about doing them. So let's look at exercise number 1 together. And I'm just, as we go through this course, I don't see where you'd have a need to translate English back into Greek, but you do have a need to be able to translate the Greek into English. So we're going to look at that set of exercises only from the text. Exercise number 1, the first word is blepes. So what you're going to do with that, number 1, you're going to translate it, which simply means you see. But you also will want to parse that. It is the present active indicative second person singular of blepo. Gnoskes, you will want to do the same thing. That is, you know. The present active indicative second person singular of gnosko. Limbanes. If you remember, that word has 2 different meanings, I take or I receive. So for here, let's use take. You take. Present active indicative, second person singular of lambano. You take. So blepes, you see. Gnosko, you know. Limbanes, you take. Each one being the present active indicative, second person singular of blepo, gnosko, lambano. Practice that this week. Take your time with it. Memorize those ending forms for the verbs. Omega is singular, first person singular. Ace, epsilon, iota, sigma is going to be your second person singular. A, epsilon, iota is going to be your third person singular. Omen, omicron, mu, epsilon, nu is going to be first person plural. We. Ete, epsilon, tau, epsilon is going to be your second person plural. And then finally, usi is going to be your third person plural. It's going to be omicron, upsilon, sigma, iota. Your stem plus that ending is going to give you the translation for all of those exercises. This plus those 8 words that you have for vocabulary this week will give you a beginning on Greek. And it's some words that hold some theological significance as you go through the New Testament. Blepo, I see. Gnosko, I know. Didasko, I teach. Grapho, I write. Echo, I have. Lambano, I take or I receive. Luo, I loose or I destroy. And lego, I say. Jesus says lego many times throughout the New Testament. We talk about sight many times throughout the New Testament as Jesus heals the blind. We talk about gnosko, gnosis. That's where we get the word for Gnosticism from, which is when you get into nouns, you're going to see some of the same stem forms, which gnosko is leading to knowledge. To know something is to lead to knowledge. So you're going to find that playing an important part. The scribes writing over and over, or you have seen it written, or you have heard it said. Speaking of lego or grapho, I write or I say. So words of significance, verbs of significance that will get you on your way to understanding things in the present, active, indicative. Memorize those 6 endings, those 8 words. That's only 14 things to memorize for this week, and it will have you well on your way to understanding how Greek is formed, and it will make the rest of the lessons just a little bit easier as we go forward. When you come back next week, we're going to begin looking at some nouns. In particular, we're going to look at some masculine nouns, and we will discuss declensions, and we will discuss gender of words in Greek. And I look forward to being back with you for lesson 3. And just a word of explanation. By lesson 3, I mean the third lesson in what I'm doing. We have skipped lesson 2 in the textbook, but when I speak of what lesson we're on, it will be the lesson that I am on as I have taught, and not necessarily corresponding to the lesson number in the book. So today would be lesson 3 in the book, but it's really lesson 2. Next week is lesson 4 in the book, but it's really lesson 3 of how we are learning Greek. Pray everyone has a blessed day.